It was a dry California morning, the kind where the sky looked washed clean and the sun had just begun to climb, spilling gold over the tarmac at Willard Airfield, a small private jet terminal just outside Sacramento. A matte black Cadillac Escalade eased up to Hangar 3, its tires crunching softly over the gravel pull-in. The SUV came to a smooth stop, and from the driver's side stepped Kendrick Vaughn, early 40s, calm presence, sharp without trying. He wore a navy bomber jacket over a charcoal crewneck, fitted jeans, clean white sneakers. No flash, no noise, just someone who looked like he moved differently, like the room adjusted when he walked in. He didn't glance around, didn't check his phone. He already knew everything was running on time. Kendrick wasn't late, and he never made a scene. Inside the hangar, the sleek Gulfstream G650 sat waiting on the tarmac, all polished aluminum, leather interiors, and twin Rolls-Royce engines humming low from pre-flight checks. The crew had just finished fueling. The stairs were down. Kendrick's usual co-pilot had already confirmed everything over text the night before. This wasn't a business trip, not exactly. He was flying out to Denver for a quiet meeting with a tech firm his investment group had been circling. Still, he brought his work bag, still had the pitch deck loaded on his iPad. Even when Kendrick wasn't working, his mind didn't stop moving. He stepped out of the Escalade and nodded briefly to the ramp agent, who gave him a small, respectful wave. Kendrick didn't expect fanfare. He just expected professionalism. That quiet, seamless efficiency money was supposed to buy. He took a slow breath and headed toward the jet. No one stopped him. Not yet. In the distance, a private pilot stood off to the side near the hangar's entrance, scanning the aircraft with a clipboard in hand. He was maybe mid-50s, tall, posture like a drill sergeant. The uniform was regulation sharp, white shirt, black epaulets, mirrored aviator sunglasses. The kind of man who took his job seriously, but maybe a little too personally. He hadn't seen Kendrick yet. Kendrick walked steadily across the concrete. His footsteps echoed against the smooth expanse of the hangar wall. There were no cameras flashing, no entourage, no noise, just the low mechanical rhythm of jet prep and a man walking toward his own aircraft. As he reached the first step of the boarding stairs, Kendrick placed a hand on the railing. The polished metal felt cool under his palm. That's when the voice hit. "Excuse me, sir." The words weren't loud, but they cut clean through the morning air. Not a greeting, a challenge. Kendrick paused, turned his head slightly. The pilot was walking briskly toward him now, shoulders squared, tone already laced with doubt. And in that moment, barely 2 steps from his own jet, Kendrick Vaughn's entire day shifted. He didn't know it yet, but what would happen in the next 5 minutes would trigger a chain of events that wouldn't just affect this flight. It would reveal the cost of assumptions, ignite national outrage, and destroy a man's career in real time. But for now, Kendrick just stood there, calm as ever, waiting, because what the pilot said next would change everything. "Excuse me, sir," the pilot repeated, now standing just a few feet from Kendrick. He wasn't out of breath, but there was urgency in his stance, like he was here to intercept a threat. His aviators masked his eyes, but Kendrick could feel the judgment coming off the man in waves. "This aircraft is reserved for a private client," the pilot said, voice clipped. "I'm going to need to see ID and flight confirmation. No one boards without proper clearance." Kendrick didn't blink. He'd been through this kind of encounter before, boardrooms, restaurants, even his own buildings. Always the same song, just a different remix. Still, he held his tone steady. "I'm not a guest," Kendrick said calmly. "I'm the owner of this aircraft. I'm flying out to Denver this morning. My name's Kendrick Vaughn. You can radio dispatch if you need to confirm it." The pilot didn't move. His jaw tightened. "Look," he said, crossing his arms, "I don't care who you say you are. You didn't check in through the terminal, and you don't look like someone who owns a Gulfstream." There it was, that subtle switch from policy to prejudice. Kendrick raised an eyebrow. He didn't need to guess what the pilot meant. It wasn't about his name. It wasn't about his check-in. It was about the fact that he didn't fit the image the pilot had in his head of who should be standing at the bottom of a $65 million jet. "You might want to get someone on comms," Kendrick said, his voice still calm but edged with steel now. "Because in about 60 seconds, you're going to realize you have made a mistake you can't take back." The pilot gave a short, dismissive scoff and pulled his radio from his belt. He turned his back slightly, speaking low into the mic. Kendrick didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, just pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Hey," he said once it picked up. "Yeah, it's me. I'm at Willard, Hangar 3. Your guy is blocking me from boarding." "No, he doesn't know who I am." "Yeah, I'll wait." He hung up and slid the phone back into his jacket. The sound of tires crunching gravel echoed behind him. A black security SUV marked with the airfield's crest rolled up, stopping a few feet from the hangar. Two guards stepped out, walking with intent. The pilot turned toward them, still clutching his clipboard. "This guy says he owns the aircraft," he said to them, gesturing toward Kendrick. "Refused to show ID. I didn't want to take any chances." One of the guards glanced at Kendrick, his brows furrowed for just a second, and then recognition hit. "Wait, Mr. Vaughn?" the guard said, straightening. Kendrick nodded once. "That's right." The energy shifted instantly. The second guard stepped back, subtly repositioning himself, no longer watching Kendrick, but now focused on the pilot. The first guard leaned in and lowered his voice. "Sir, you might want to call dispatch right now." The pilot hesitated, visibly thrown. "Wait, you're Kendrick Vaughn?" he asked, still trying to piece it together. Kendrick didn't answer right away. He let the silence do the work. Then quietly, "I don't lease this jet. I don't rent time on it. I own the aircraft. I own the charter company, and I don't need permission to board my own plane." The pilot took a small step back. His grip on the radio tightened. This isn't standard protocol," he mumbled. "The way you rolled up, the way you're dressed, it just didn't track." And there it was again, not in the words, but in the tone. Not wealthy enough, not old enough, not white enough, not what he expected. Kendrick's voice stayed low, steady. "You ever think maybe you can't recognize power when it doesn't look like what you're used to?" The pilot didn't answer. The security guards didn't move, but one of them had already started filming quietly from his phone, angled low just in case, because something was happening, and everyone present could feel it. The pilot hesitated, eyes flicking between Kendrick and the guards, like he was trying to do math in his head, and the numbers weren't adding up. Still gripping his radio, he turned his back slightly and muttered into it again, louder this time. "Base, this is Captain Laird at Hangar 3. I've got a gentleman here claiming to be the owner of the Vaughn Jet G650, named Kendrick Vaughn. Can you confirm manifest?" Silence on the other end. The wind brushed across the tarmac, dry and sharp. Kendrick didn't move. A second passed, then two, then finally a voice crackled through the radio, low, firm, authoritative. "Captain Laird, do not proceed. Mr. Vaughn is the principal owner. You are to stand down immediately and await further instruction." You could have heard a pin drop. The two guards exchanged a look. One of them gave a low whistle under his breath and stepped back even farther. The pilot turned slowly toward Kendrick, the radio still in his hand. His lips parted like he wanted to say something. An apology, maybe. But what came out was even more telling. "Well," he mumbled, "there must have been some miscommunication." Kendrick didn't blink. "There wasn't." Captain Laird tried again. "I wasn't informed the owner would be present for this flight." "You didn't need to be," Kendrick said, his voice crisp, measured. "And even if I wasn't the owner, I don't owe you a particular outfit, a certain car, or a specific tone to justify basic respect." The pilot shifted his weight awkwardly, one hand still on the clipboard like it could protect him. "I was just following procedure," he muttered, but even he didn't believe it anymore. "You were following your assumptions," Kendrick said plainly. He glanced past the man now, toward the jet. The co-pilot, a younger man with soft eyes and a well-pressed uniform, had quietly descended halfway down the stairs during the exchange. He stood still, watching, not interfering, just listening. "Sorry for the holdup, Mr. Vaughn," the co-pilot said, his voice low and respectful. "Everything's ready to go. Clearance is confirmed. We're just waiting on you." Kendrick gave a faint nod. He stepped past Captain Laird without another word and headed up the stairs, his sneakers brushing gently against the aluminum steps. But halfway up, the radio buzzed again. Laird raised it instinctively. "Captain Laird, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. Do not proceed with this or any further flight until directed. Report to ground operations, Terminal Office 2. There it was, final, cold, Undeniable. Kendrick heard it, paused briefly at the top of the stairs, but didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He stepped inside the cabin. Cool air, soft leather, walnut trim, silent luxury. No drama, no spectacle, just clarity. He dropped his bag on the seat closest to the cockpit and sank into it, rolling up his sleeve. He tapped his tablet to life and pulled up the morning's agenda. Denver meetings, Q3 numbers, infrastructure updates, pilot replacement. Behind him, the door of the aircraft closed with a soft hydraulic hiss. From the cockpit, the co-pilot's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Vaughn, we'll be in the air in 6 minutes. Estimated wheels up 9:05. Is that acceptable?" Kendrick smiled faintly. "Perfect." He leaned back, eyes settling on the clouds forming in the distance. Outside, on the tarmac, Captain Laird was still standing in place, staring at the ground like it had betrayed him. The guards weren't watching him anymore. They were watching Kendrick's jet, because they just witnessed what it looks like when the room realizes too late who actually owns the room. And for Kendrick Vaughn, the unraveling had just begun. The jet was lifting, smooth and silent, the hum of its engines just a whisper beneath the cabin floor. But Kendrick wasn't thinking about altitude or airspeed. He wasn't even thinking about Captain Laird anymore. His mind had already drifted. 2 months back. A different day, a different jet, a different moment that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon, Phoenix sky cloudless and bright, when Kendrick boarded a chartered flight after closing a major contract renegotiation. Nothing flashy, just business. He was tired, but the good kind of tired, the kind that comes after winning without raising your voice. He climbed into the jet and offered a nod to the pilot waiting by the steps. The man didn't respond, not a word, just a clipped glance and a cold, "Welcome aboard," that didn't feel like a welcome at all. Kendrick didn't think much of it at first. He wasn't there to make friends, he was there to fly home. But once they were in the air, small things started to pile up. The delay in service, the subtle shift in tone when he made a request, the way the pilot addressed his assistant like she was the client, never once making eye contact with Kendrick. It wasn't aggressive, just cold, professional enough to be defensible, dismissive enough to be unmistakable. Kendrick didn't say anything. Not then. He got to Boston late, said thank you, stepped off the plane, shook his assistant's hand, and went home. But 3 nights later, he sat on the back patio of his Oakland home, a glass of Lagavulin in one hand, a question in the other. Why did it still sit with him? He'd been through worse, he'd heard worse, he'd survived worse. But something about that flight stuck in his ribs like a splinter. Maybe it was how routine it was, how the pilot barely masked his doubt, how little hesitation he had before assuming Kendrick didn't belong. Not because Kendrick had done anything wrong, but because he didn't look like he belonged in that cabin. Because success didn't look like him in that man's eyes. That night, Kendrick made a call. "Maxine, madam," he said when his lawyer picked up, "I need you to do some digging." Maxine Gwen didn't ask questions. She was one of the few people who didn't need to. "Name of the charter company?" she asked, already opening her laptop. Kendrick told her. "I don't want to file a complaint," he said. "I don't want a refund. I want the whole thing." Maxine's fingers froze. "You want to buy it?" "No," Kendrick said calmly. "I want to own it." Within 6 weeks, through a holding firm, he quietly became the controlling stakeholder of an air charter service with a fleet of 6 jets. He didn't visit the offices, didn't change the branding, didn't walk into the boardroom and wave his name around. He didn't need to. The message wasn't about flash, it was about foundation. Because Kendrick Vaughn was tired of renting space in rooms he'd helped build. And now he owned the walls. The jet banked left, the cityscape of Los Angeles shrinking beneath them as the clouds opened up. Back in the cabin, Kendrick adjusted his tablet, reviewing the day's schedule. But his mind lingered, on that patio, on that drink, on that decision. He didn't buy the charter company for revenge. He bought it to rewrite the rules. For himself, and for anyone who'd ever been made to feel like success had a dress code or a color. For anyone who had been overlooked because they weren't loud enough, rich-looking enough, white enough. Because sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is owning the seat they try to keep from you. By the time Kendrick's jet touched down in Kansas City, the internet was already on fire. He hadn't posted anything. He hadn't spoken to the press, but someone had filmed it, a 48-second clip, shaky but clear enough. Captured from behind a fuel truck on the tarmac, it showed Kendrick standing calmly at the foot of his jet while Captain Laird barked orders and called for security. The audio wasn't perfect, but you could hear the pilot's voice cut through the morning air. "I don't care who you say you are. You're not boarding this aircraft." And then Kendrick's voice, calm but deliberate. "You ever think maybe you can't recognize power when it doesn't look like what you're used to?" That line, that single sentence, spread like wildfire. Twitter picked it up first. Instagram Reels followed. Then TikTok exploded. By noon, the clip had 3.1 million views. By dinner, it passed 12 million. Hashtags took off like smoke from a lit match. Hashtag Kendrick Vaughn Jet and Sean, "This is why we own Jod Power and Silent," as celebrities reposted it. Athletes commented. Even Fortune 500 CEOs weighed in, some with praise, others with awkward silence. News outlets ran headlines like, "Private pilot denies black owner access to his own jet. Assumptions in aviation, the Kendrick Vaughn incident. This is what quiet power looks like." Back at Kendrick's hotel in downtown Kansas City, his phone was blowing up. 15 missed calls, dozens of texts, 3 from his assistant, 1 from Maxine, the rest from numbers he didn't recognize. He didn't answer a single one. He sat quietly in the back seat of a black SUV, watching the city lights blur past the window. Not smug, not shaken, just present. Because he'd seen this before, not the viral part, but the moment where private indignity becomes public reckoning. Up in the penthouse suite, he poured himself a glass of water and opened the message thread with Maxine. She'd sent a link. He tapped it. A morning news segment came into view. Split screen. Left, the viral clip. Right, a studio anchor looking stunned. "We've just learned that Mr. Kendrick Vaughn is not only the rightful passenger, but the owner of the entire charter company. The pilot, identified as Captain Laird, has reportedly been relieved of duty." They called it eye-opening. But Kendrick didn't need their analysis. He already knew the truth. People only believe what they're used to seeing. And if you don't fit the picture in their heads, they'll try to rewrite the story in real time. But this time, the camera didn't lie. Down in Los Angeles, the fallout had already begun. The charter company's executive team was in full crisis mode. Emails flew, PR teams scrambled, HR drafted statements. And on a quiet line in the back corner of the ops floor, a flight coordinator whispered into a phone, "Yeah, I think we might have just lost everything." Captain Laird's name was already trending, not in praise but in shame. Clips of his voice denying Kendrick's ownership played over and over, stitched into reaction videos, memes, think pieces. Some people tried to defend him, said it was protocol, not prejudice. But that defense didn't hold up, because no one could explain away the tone, the body language, the assumption. He didn't ask Kendrick who he was. He told him what he couldn't be. And now the world was watching. Kendrick muted the video. He didn't need to relive it. What mattered now wasn't the noise. It was the clarity. The clarity that came when people saw, for the first time, what happens when quiet power refuses to step aside. He wasn't just a black man on a tarmac. He was the man holding the deed. And now the ones who tried to keep him grounded were falling. Kendrick didn't sleep much that night. He wasn't shaken. He wasn't angry. But something sat heavy on his chest. Not the moment itself. That was already behind him. It was the decision he hadn't made yet. Whether to let it go quietly or set a standard loud enough for everyone to hear. At 5:32 a.m., Kendrick sat alone in the corner of his penthouse suite. A single cup of black coffee steamed in front of him. His laptop open, a message on the screen. It was from HR. Subject line, "Captain Laird, formal apology plus request for reinstatement." He read it once, then again. The letter wasn't an apology. It was a plea disguised in corporate politeness. "I was not informed the owner would be boarding. My actions were based on protocol. This situation could have been clarified more effectively had proper communication occurred." Nowhere in the letter did Captain Laird ask how it felt. Nowhere did he acknowledge the assumption. Nowhere did he say the words, "I was wrong." Kendrick closed the laptop and picked up his phone. Maxine answered on the first ring. She didn't say hello. She already knew. "You've made your decision," she said. Yeah, Kendrick replied. He's done. Quietly or loud? Kendrick stood up and looked out the window, watching the sun creep over the Kansas City skyline. The city didn't know it yet, but things were shifting. Not quietly, he said. Not this time. There was a pause on the line. Then Maxine said simply, "Got it. I'll handle it." He hung up. No anger, no drama, just a standard being protected. If Laird had done this to anyone else, no one would have questioned the termination. But now that it was Kendrick, the owner, the client, the man with the most power in the room, they wanted him to be the bigger person. But being bigger didn't mean staying silent. It meant making it very clear that dignity wasn't negotiable. Kendrick drafted one final message. 2. Director of Ops effective immediately. Captain Laird is permanently removed from all flight duties and employment. Offer severance only if required by contract. Do not retain him in any capacity. He hit send. No punctuation, no explanation, just resolution. That afternoon, back in Los Angeles, the company boardroom was silent. Executives who had only met Kendrick over video calls now watched the viral clip with fresh eyes. No longer just a name on a contract. He was the man who now had the internet, the press, and the public watching every move the company made. And he had made his. Captain Laird was done. By 3:00 p.m., an internal memo circulated. By 3:15, news outlets had it. Pilot fired after confronting jet owner in viral video. Some called it harsh, others called it justice. But Kendrick didn't care what they called it. He wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in alignment. If the company was going to carry his name, even quietly, even through holding firms, it had to reflect his values. Respect isn't given because you wear a uniform. It's earned by how you treat people when no one's watching. The next morning, a different pilot greeted Kendrick at the hangar in Kansas City. He didn't flinch when he saw Kendrick step out of the car. He didn't hesitate when he reached for the paperwork. He simply said, "Good morning, sir. Jet's ready when you are." Kendrick nodded once and boarded. The message had been sent, and the people who needed to hear it had. 3 days later, Kendrick was back in Oakland. The headlines had shifted, a new scandal, a different name, another news cycle. That's how these things go. But the video, that 48-second clip, didn't fade. It kept circulating, not with drama, not with spectacle, but with resonance. People saw it, and they felt it. A quiet man standing at the base of his own jet, being questioned, dismissed, treated like a trespasser in a space he owned, and responding not with outrage, but certainty. You ever think maybe you can't recognize power when it doesn't look like what you're used to? That one sentence lit the internet like a match dropped in dry brush. Comment sections flooded. Stitch videos, think pieces, reaction clips. Some praised him. Others picked apart his tone, his clothes, his response. But Kendrick? He didn't respond to any of it. He never did. What mattered more were the quiet messages that came in later. A DM from a young man in Houston. "They always ask me what I'm doing in the executive lounge. Today I didn't flinch. I thought of you." An email from a woman in Vermont who ran a helicopter charter service. "Thank you for showing the rest of us what holding the line with grace looks like. I sent your video to every pilot on our roster." Even a handwritten letter, no return address, from someone in Atlanta. "They told me I looked like the janitor at my own company party. I walked away. But next time I won't." These weren't fans. They were mirrors. People who had been sized up, talked down to, overlooked in rooms they'd built themselves. And now they had a name, a clip, a reference point for their own moment of quiet defiance. It wasn't just about Kendrick anymore. It was about all of them. Back at the Rhodes Aviation headquarters, something small but powerful happened. In the employee lounge, someone pinned a printed quote to the bulletin board. Bold type. Simple font. No logo. "Respect doesn't come from how loud you speak. It comes from how you carry the silence." Kendrick Vance. He hadn't written it for public use. It was something he said to Maxine years ago, after a failed merger where executives smiled in his face but ignored every word he said. Someone remembered, and now it was framed by the coffee machine, right next to the birthday calendar and the maintenance rotation chart. He noticed it during a quiet walk through the hangar just after midnight. No one else around, just the soft echo of his footsteps in the low hum of a generator. He paused, looked at it, smiled. Not big, just enough. He didn't need to go viral. He didn't need the headlines. What he needed was already happening. A shift in culture, in conversation, in the spaces where power is defined and redefined. Later that month, a business magazine called to request an interview. They wanted a feature on the man who fired a pilot and flipped the industry standard. Kendrick declined, but he sent them a quote. This wasn't about a seat on a plane, it was about who gets questioned and who gets trusted without having to prove anything. They printed it, full page, black background, white letters, no photo, just words. And sometimes that's all you need.